The Medes outpost hung like a dark pearl against the violet gas clouds of the Carina Nebula. Its metallic shell pockmarked with docking ports, and observation bubbles reflected the distant light of foreign stars. Inside, the commerce levels bustled with a cacophony of languages, scents, and technologies that defined the edge of civilized space in the year 3025. Dr. Marisol Vega, known as Mara, to the few friends she had maintained through years of solitary research, stood at the viewport of her rented quarters, watching the slow ballet of trading vessels outside. She pressed her hand against the cold, transparent steel, feeling the subtle vibration of the station's life support systems. The sensation reminded her of Earth, a distant memory for most spacers, but an obsession for her. Visitor approaching Engineer Vega announced her room's AI in the flat, standardized voice mandated for human interfaces. Unlike the melodious, personality-rich AIs that the gelled technocrats enjoyed, human-designed systems were legally restricted to basic functionality. "Another inspection?" Mara asked, not bothering to hide her irritation. "Negative. Station Customs Officer Tassar requests entry." Mara raised an eyebrow. The name wasn't familiar, and she'd met most of the station's official personnel during her 3-day processing period. "Grant access but engage privacy protocols." The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a slender, blue-skinned figure. Like all Gels, Tassar possessed the characteristic translucent quality to his epidermis that had earned his species their nickname among humans. The complex network of neural filaments, visible beneath the surface of his skin, pulsed with subtle patterns of light, a biological technology that humans had never managed to replicate. "Engineer Vega," he said, with the careful pronunciation of someone who rarely spoke verbal English. "I trust your accommodations are satisfactory." Mara gestured around the Spartan room. "As satisfactory as second-tier lodging ever is. I assume you're here about my exhibition application." Tassar tilted his head, the gesture making the neural pathways in his neck flash briefly. "Indeed. The Technology Exchange Committee has concerns." Of course they did. Mara had expected nothing less. She crossed to the small fabrication table, where her portable terminal sat amid scattered components and tools. With a swipe, she pulled up the holographic rendering of Prometheus Mark I, her passion project for the past 3 years. "Let me guess," she said, rotating the 3-dimensional blueprint of the mechanical exoskeleton. "They're concerned about outdated technological paradigms cluttering the exhibition space. Or perhaps it's about maintaining appropriate representation of advancement trajectories." Tassar's facial patterns flickered in what might have been amusement. "Your understanding of bureaucratic language is impressive for a human. But no, your application has been provisionally approved." Mara froze her hand suspended in the hologram. "It has—" "Yes. Though I should inform you that Auction Commissioner Zarkel has personally flagged your submission for cultural contextualization." Mara's momentary elation evaporated. Cultural contextualization was exhibition speak for place it in the historical curiosities section, where failed technologies and primitive artifacts were displayed as cautionary examples rather than innovations. "My mech suit isn't a museum piece," she said, closing the hologram with a sharp gesture. "It incorporates design principles that predate the Gel Accords, yes, but the implementation is novel. The hydraulic response system alone—" Tassar raised a hand. "I am merely a messenger, Engineer Vega. Your demonstration is scheduled for tomorrow at the Central Exchange Hall. I came to provide your access credentials and unofficial advice." Mara narrowed her eyes. "What kind of advice?" "The Commissioner has invited several guild representatives to your demonstration. They rarely attend presentations by human engineers." Tassar's neural patterns darkened to a deeper blue. "It would be wise to manage your expectations." After Tassar departed, Mara stood in silence for several minutes. She had known this wouldn't be easy. Humans had been relegated to technological backwaters since the formation of the Galactic Alliance 2 centuries ago. The official narrative claimed that human innovation had simply failed to keep pace with the rapid advancement of other species, particularly the Gels, whose neural interface technologies had revolutionized everything from medicine to faster-than-light travel. But Mara had spent her career studying the curious gap in human technological development, the lost decades following the resource wars of the 23rd century, when Earth's greatest minds had supposedly turned inward, focusing on planetary restoration rather than expansion. The gap that coincidentally preceded the Gel's sudden technological renaissance. She turned to the cargo container in the corner of her quarters. Inside, packed carefully in shock-absorbing foam, lay the physical manifestation of her thesis, a mechanical exosuit built entirely with principles and components that could have been manufactured 7 centuries ago. "They're going to laugh at you," she told herself, placing her palm against the container. "They always do." But this time, she had something they'd never seen before. The central exchange hall of Metis Station was designed to intimidate. Its vaulted ceiling stretched nearly 30 meters high, adorned with holographic displays, showing the real-time movement of commodities, currencies, and technologies throughout the Alliance. The trading floor itself was arranged in concentric circles, with the most prestigious offerings positioned in the center and lesser goods relegated to the periphery. Mara's demonstration had been assigned to the outermost ring, as far from the central auction block as possible, while still technically being part of the exhibition. "Typical," she muttered, as she guided the hovercart carrying her sealed container. The anti-grav unit strained under the weight of the mech suit components, another reminder of how human technology was consistently allocated lower power reserves than other species' equipment. A small crowd had gathered around her assigned station, curious onlookers drawn by the novelty of a human presenter, rather than any genuine interest in her work. Mara recognized the types academics collecting examples of primitive engineering, thrill seekers, hoping to witness a spectacular failure, and a handful of human sympathizers who attended out of solidarity but expected little. What she hadn't expected was the tall, regal figure standing at the front of the gathering. Commissioner Zarkel's neural patterns flowed like liquid silver beneath his pale blue skin, marking him as a member of the Gel elite. Unlike Tassar's simple customs uniform, Zarkel wore the elaborate metallic robes of the Technology Guild, each fold and seam embedded with filaments that connected directly to his nervous system. "Engineer Vega," he said, his voice carrying the harmonics that Gels use to convey status. "We are most curious about your historical recreation." The pause before the last 2 words made it clear exactly what he thought of her work. Mara forced a polite smile as she authenticated her credentials at the platform terminal. "Commissioner, I appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to attend," she said, triggering the container's unpacking sequence. "Although I should clarify that Prometheus isn't a recreation or replica. It's an original design based on human engineering principles." Zarkel's neural patterns pulsed in the Gel equivalent of a dismissive chuckle. "Principles that your species abandoned centuries ago, as I understand it. One wonders why you would pursue such antiquated pathways when the Alliance offers access to more evolved technologies." Several spectators flashed agreement patterns, and Mara felt her cheeks flush with the hot rush of anger and embarrassment. This was exactly the reaction she had anticipated, yet it stung no less for its predictability. The container's sides folded outward, like the petals of a metal flower, revealing her creation piece by piece. Unlike the sleek, organically inspired designs favored by Alliance engineers, Prometheus Mark I was unabashedly mechanical. Hydraulic joints connected articulated limb segments, exposed gears meshed together in complex arrays, and bundled cables ran like synthetic tendons through the frame. "As you can see," Mara said, raising her voice to address the growing crowd, "Prometheus operates on purely mechanical principles. No neural interfaces, no quantum entanglement, no consciousness transference. Just the elegant efficiency of engineering fundamentals that humans mastered 700 years ago." She stepped onto the platform and began the suit's activation sequence, keying commands into the wrist-mounted control panel. With a series of pneumatic hisses and the whir of flywheels spinning up to speed, the exoskeleton shuddered to life. The crowd's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Laughter rippled through the gathering, some polite, some openly mocking. One gel researcher was recording the demonstration with an expression humans would interpret as horrified fascination. "It's so noisy," someone remarked. "Look at those exposed mechanisms. One micrometeorite would disable it completely." Is this what humans consider innovation? No wonder they're still struggling with basic interstellar navigation. Zarkel raised a hand, silencing the commentary. Engineer Vega, perhaps you could explain the purpose of this device. Surely the Alliance's standard mobility enhancements offer superior functionality without such cumbersome architecture. Mara focused on completing the calibration sequence, refusing to let the derision affect her concentration. Standard mobility enhancements require neural compatibility, Commissioner. 93 species within the Alliance cannot use them due to nervous system incompatibilities. Prometheus works for anyone, no neural interface required. With the final command entered, she stepped into the frame and allowed the suit to close around her. The sensation was unlike anything available in modern technology, a physical embrace rather than the strange disembodiment of neural interfaces. Servo motors whirred as she lifted her arms, the exoskeleton amplifying her movements with hydraulic precision. "Observe," she said, her voice now amplified through the suit's external speakers. No special training required, no risk of neural feedback, and most importantly, no dependency on Alliance-approved synthetic neural paths. She demonstrated a series of movements, lifting, turning, crouching, reaching, each motion accompanied by the mechanical symphony of moving parts that the crowd found so primitive. With each step, the platform beneath her feet registered and displayed the force multiplication. Her human strength enhanced tenfold by the mechanical advantage of the suit's design. Zarkel watched with an expression Mara couldn't quite interpret. When she completed the demonstration sequence, the Commissioner stepped forward, his neural patterns shifting to the formal configuration used for official judgments. "A fascinating historical exercise, Engineer Vega. Your recreation demonstrates why humanity eventually abandoned such approaches." He gestured to the display, showing the suit's power consumption. "The energy inefficiency alone would make this impractical for any serious application. Not to mention the maintenance requirements with so many, what do you call them, nuts and bolts." Laughter rippled through the crowd again. Mara stood tall in her suit, even as humiliation burned through her. "Nevertheless," Zarkel continued, "the committee appreciates your contribution to our understanding of developmental dead ends. Your exhibition will be noted in the cultural archives." With that dismissal, he turned away, his entourage of guild officials following in his wake. The crowd began to disperse, their curiosity satisfied and their preconceptions confirmed. Humans remain technological curiosities capable of participating in Alliance society, but never leading it. As Mara began the shutdown sequence, she noticed Tassar lingering at the edge of the platform, his neural patterns subdued. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod that might have contained a hint of sympathy, or something else she couldn't quite identify. One thought crystallized in her mind. As she watched Zarkel's retreating form, she would prove them wrong. Not just about Prometheus, but about everything they thought they knew about human innovation. Mara spent the next 3 cycles of the station's artificial day in a haze of furious activity. The humiliation of the demonstration had kindled something in her, not just anger, but determination born of suspicion. Commissioner Zarkel's dismissal had been too practiced, too ready, as if he'd been prepared to discredit her work before seeing it. She pulled up the station's public archives, searching for information about the Technology Guild's early development. Most of the data was surrounded by access restrictions, but as a registered exhibitor, she had limited permissions to historical records. What she found raised more questions than answers. The Guild's leap from a moderately advanced, warp-capable civilization to the dominant technological force in the sector had occurred with suspicious rapidity. Within a single generation, they had developed neural interfaces, consciousness transference, and quantum entanglement communication technologies that other species, including humans, had been working toward for centuries. The timing aligned perfectly with humanity's technological stagnation following the resource wars. The official history claimed that Earth had turned inward, focusing on ecological restoration rather than innovation. But Mara had always found that explanation too convenient. Her research was interrupted by a soft chime from her door. She quickly closed the archive viewer before authorizing entry. Tassar stepped into her quarters, his customs uniform exchanged for the simple tunic of off-duty station personnel. Without the formal attire, Mara noticed subtle differences in his appearance. Compared to other Gels she'd encountered, his neural patterns were less symmetrical with irregular clusters that suggested either injury or a genetic variation. "Engineer Vega," he said, glancing around the room with obvious discomfort. "I hope I'm not intruding." Mara gestured to the room's single chair while she remained standing. "Not at all, Officer Tassar, though I'm surprised to see you again so soon. I'm not here in my official capacity." He hesitated, neural patterns, fluctuating in what seemed like nervousness. "Your demonstration today, it was not treated fairly." Mara crossed her arms. "That's an understatement, but hardly surprising. The guilds have been dismissing human innovation since the Alliance formed." "With good reason," Tassar said quietly. Something in his tone made Mara pay closer attention. "Meaning?" Tassar's patterns, dim to near darkness, a gel expression of extreme caution or fear. "Commissioner Zarkel recognized elements of your design, not as primitive human technology, but as something else entirely." "What are you talking about? Have you ever wondered why humans suddenly stopped advancing? Why your species went from the brink of neural interface technology and stable wormhole generation to focusing on nuts and bolts?" Mara felt a chill run through her. Historical records say what the Guild wants them to say." Tassar's voice had dropped to a whisper, despite the privacy protocols engaged in Mara's quarters. "I work in Customs Engineer Vega. Every day I process artifacts and technologies from across the Alliance. For 3 decades I've noticed patterns, inconsistencies in the technological record." He reached into his tunic and withdrew a small data crystal, its surface etched with markings Mara didn't recognize. "What's this?" she asked. "Coordinates, access codes. In the station's deepest archival level, there's a sealed repository dating back to the early Alliance years. Official records claim it contains contaminated materials from a failed xenobiology experiment, but the containment protocols are technological, not biological." Mara took the crystal, turning it over in her fingers. "Why are you telling me this? Why take the risk?" Tassar's neural patterns shifted again, forming a configuration Mara had never seen before. "Because your Prometheus suit contained hydraulic sequencing that shouldn't exist. The compression ratios in your joint actuators, they match theoretical models that were supposedly developed by gel engineers a century after the Alliance formed. But you built them using human principles from 700 years ago." Mara felt her pulse quicken. "That's impossible. I designed those actuators based on old Earth hydraulics texts." "Exactly." Tassar stood moving toward the door. "The Guild doesn't fear human technology because it's primitive Engineer Vega. They fear it because they've spent centuries ensuring no one realizes where their innovations really came from." After Tassar left, Mara sat in stunned silence, the data crystal heavy in her palm. His claims seemed fantastic conspiracy theories that contradicted everything the Alliance had taught about technological development. And yet, she had always questioned the convenient timing of humanity's decline and the gel's ascension. Had always wondered why certain human design principles were classified as inefficient, despite their elegant functionality. The data crystal contained access codes to a restricted area of the station. Entering it without authorization would violate at least 3 Alliance protocols and could result in her permanent removal from Guild space. If Tassar was setting her up, her career would be over. But if he was telling the truth, Mara pocketed the crystal and began making preparations. She would need to modify Prometheus for the journey. The standard exhibition version wouldn't be sufficient for what she was planning. But with a few adjustments based on her original designs, the ones she'd held back for fear of rejection, it might become something the Guild had never anticipated. The lowest levels of Metastation were utilitarian spaces, far from the polished commercial zones above. Maintenance tunnels and storage compartments formed a labyrinthine network, rarely visited by anyone except service droids and the occasional technician. The environmental systems down here were minimal, just enough atmosphere and gravity to prevent structural degradation. Mara moved silently through the dimly lit corridors, each step amplified by Prometheus' marked ascent. She'd spent a full day reconfiguring the suit, incorporating modifications that she'd originally deemed too radical for the exhibition. The external shell now concealed most of the mechanical components, giving the suit a sleeker appearance. More importantly, she'd activated the experimental power core, a compact fusion cell, based on principles she'd discovered in ancient Earth archives. The data crystal had led her to a section of the station that didn't appear on any public maps. The access panel was disguised as a routine maintenance junction, indistinguishable from dozens of others, except for a small marking etched into the corner, a symbol that matched one on the crystal. Mara hesitated before the panel. Once she entered the code, there would be no turning back. If Tassar had deceived her, security would arrive within minutes. If he'd told the truth, she wasn't entirely sure what she would find. With a deep breath, she entered the sequence from the crystal. The panel remained unchanged for several seconds, and Mara felt her heart sink. Had the code expired, or had she been led into a trap? Then, with a soft click, the entire section of wall recessed and slid aside, revealing a narrow passage that sloped downward. The air that wafted out smelled stale, as if the space beyond had been sealed for decades. Mara activated Prometheus's external lights and ventured into the passageway. The suit's enhanced mobility allowed her to navigate the tight space, ducking beneath hanging cables and stepping over bundles of conduit that crisscrossed the floor. As she descended, she noticed something odd about the construction. Unlike the standardized components used throughout the rest of the station, these walls contained elements she didn't recognize. The passage opened into a circular chamber, approximately 20 meters across. The room was dominated by data storage units, not the crystalline neural interface archives used throughout Alliance space, but physical servers with cooling systems and power distribution networks. Ancient technology by gel standards, yet Mara recognized the architecture immediately. Human quantum storage, she whispered, her voice echoing in the confined space. Late 22nd century design. The servers were miraculously still operational, though clearly running on minimal power. Status lights blinked in slow sequences across their surfaces, and occasionally, a cooling fan would spin up briefly before falling silent again. At the center of the room stood a simple terminal with a physical interface, a keyboard, and display screen, rather than a neural connection point. Mara approached it cautiously, noting the thick layer of dust covering its surface. No one had touched this equipment in years, perhaps decades. The screen flickered to life as she neared, responding to some unseen sensor. Text appeared, English, text not the standardized Alliance script. Galactic Archive Project Access Level. Administrator Identity Verification Required. Mara stared at the message in disbelief. The Galactic Archive Project was a myth, a rumored initiative from Earth's final days as an independent power. Before the Resource Wars, before the Alliance, humanity had supposedly created a backup of their collective technological knowledge, anticipating a dark age that might follow global conflict. Most historians dismissed it as propaganda. Yet here was evidence that not only had the project existed, but its data had survived hidden in the bowels of an Alliance station. With trembling fingers, Mara connected Prometheus's wrist interface to the terminal. The suit contained her engineering credentials, genetic profile, and biometric data, everything that identified her as human, and more specifically, as a registered technology historian. The screen flickered again. Identity confirmed. Vega Marisol A. Human genome verification. Positive accessing archive. The servers around the room hummed to life power, flowing into systems that had lain dormant for unknown years. Displays illuminated showing schematics, formulae, and technical specifications that scrolled too quickly for Mara to follow. "What is this?" she murmured, overwhelmed by the flood of information. As if in response, the central display stabilized, showing a single document. Project Prometheus, Mechanical Assistance Framework, version 12.5.8, Classified Earth Defense Initiative. Mara felt her breath catch. Prometheus. She had named her exosuit after the mythological figure who gave fire to humanity, never knowing that the name had been used before by the very engineers whose work she was attempting to recreate. She scrolled through the document, her excitement growing with each page. The schematics were familiar, so familiar that she felt a chill of recognition. The hydraulic systems, the joint articulations, the power distribution network. They were almost identical to designs she had developed independently, working from first principles and fragmented historical records. But there was more, much more. Sections she had struggled with, problems she hadn't solved, were addressed here with elegant solutions that made perfect sense once she saw them. And beyond the mechanical elements were integration points for neural interfaces, quantum computation nodes, and something called a Lagrange cell. "This is impossible," she whispered, scrolling further. "These technologies were supposedly developed centuries apart by different species." The next document that appeared confirmed her growing suspicion. Neural Interface Technology, Transfer Protocols, version 6.2.1, Classified Human Evolutionary Pathways. The neural interface designs precursors to the technology that had made the gels the dominant power in the Alliance had been developed by humans. The schematics showed implementation methods, compatibility matrices for different nervous systems, and adaptation protocols that looked eerily similar to the proprietary gel technologies now used throughout Alliance space. Mara felt a surge of anger mixed with vindication. Humanity hadn't failed to innovate, or chosen to focus inward. They'd been robbed. Somehow, their most advanced technologies had been appropriated, rebranded, and then used to subjugate them. A soft sound behind her made Mara spin the exosuit, responding instantly to her movement. Tassar stood at the entrance to the chamber, his neural patterns flickering with anxiety. "You found it," he said, stepping forward. "I wasn't certain the access codes would still work after all this time." Mara remained in a defensive stance. "How did you know about this place? About any of this?" Tassar's patterns shifted to a configuration of openness, a gel expression of honesty. "My lineage is complicated, Engineer Vega. My great-grandmother was among the first gels to work with human scientists before the Alliance. She preserved certain knowledge that the Guild would prefer remained buried. Knowledge that the gels stole Earth's technology." Tassar winced. "It's more complex than theft. There was collaboration, initially exchange of ideas. But when the resource wars weakened Earth's position, certain gel factions saw an opportunity. They systematized the appropriation, classified the human origins, and gradually positioned gel innovation as the natural evolution of technology." Mara gestured to the servers around them. "And this was hiding humanity's achievements, part of that systematic appropriation? This archive was supposed to be destroyed." Tassar moved to one of the servers, running his fingers over its surface, almost reverently. "The fact that it exists at all is remarkable. It must have been hidden by humans working with gel allies, people like my great-grandmother who saw the injustice of what was happening." Mara turned back to the terminal, downloading as much data as Prometheus's systems could store. "I need to make this public. The Alliance needs to know the truth about where their technology really comes from." Tassar's neural patterns darkened. "Commissioner Zarkel would never allow it. The Guild has suppressed similar discoveries before. They control the information networks, the academic institutions, even the historical record itself. Then we'll need to be smarter than they are. Mara disconnected from the terminal, her mind racing. These servers contain the original designs for technologies the Guild claims as their own. If we could implement even one of these, demonstrate it publicly, in a way they can't dismiss or cover up. It would be dangerous, Tassar warned. But perhaps not impossible. For the next 3 days, Mara and Tassar worked in secret, dividing their time between Mara's quarters and the hidden archive. They focused on the Lagrange cell, a power generation system that had been theoretical in human research, but was documented in remarkable detail in the archive. Unlike the neural technology that the Gels had fully integrated into their biology power systems, remained external devices. If they could construct a working Lagrange cell, based on the original human designs, it would be irrefutable evidence of the archive's authenticity. The principles are remarkable, Mara said as they reviewed the schematics. It creates a stable quantum field that harvests zero-point energy without the containment issues of traditional vacuum energy approaches. Tassar, who had taken a significant risk by reporting equipment malfunctions to excuse his absence from duty, nodded. The Guild's current power systems, what they call dimensional gradient extractors, operate on identical principles. But they claim the technology was developed 2 centuries after human contact. Mara had reconfigured Prometheus again, integrating components fabricated using the station's public manufacturing facilities. To avoid suspicion, she had spread her requests across multiple fabrication centers, describing the parts as replacements for her primitive exhibition suit. "We're taking an enormous risk," she acknowledged, as they installed the final components. "If the cell destabilizes, it could take out half the station." Tassar's neural patterns shifted to determination. "If we succeed, it could change everything. No more technological apartheid. No more species classified as developmentally limited because they don't conform to Guild standards." Mara had come to appreciate the subtle variations in gel expressions over their days of collaboration. Tassar's patterns were more expressive than most, whether from his unique heritage or personal temperament she couldn't tell. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, as they sealed the cell's containment housing. "You're risking everything, your position. You're standing with your own people." Tassar was silent for a moment, his patterns cycling through configurations too complex for Mara to interpret. "Because truth matters," he finally said. "And because I've spent my life caught between worlds too human sympathetic for the Guild elite, too gel for humans to fully trust. Perhaps I'm hoping for a universe where such distinctions become less important." The completed Lagrange cell was beautiful in its complexity, a series of nested fields contained within a housing no larger than Mara's fist. According to the archive, it could power Prometheus for decades without recharging. "The integration points match perfectly," Mara observed, as they prepared to connect it to the suit's systems. "It's as if Prometheus was designed for this technology from the beginning." "In a way it was," Tassar replied. "Your intuitive recreation of the original design principles led you closer to the truth than you realized. The moment of activation was tense. If their calculations were wrong, the consequences would be immediate and catastrophic." Mara initiated the startup sequence from behind a makeshift barrier, monitoring the energy signatures on a portable display. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a soft blue glow emanated from the cell, pulsing gently as the quantum field stabilized. Power readings spiked briefly, before settling into a steady flow that exceeded their predictions by nearly 30%. "It works," Mara whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "A human technology from 700 years ago, and it works perfectly." Tassar's patterns displayed what Mara had come to recognize as joy. "More than perfectly. This cell is producing energy levels that current Guild technology cannot match without significant scaling." But their celebration was short-lived. The quarter's AI announced, "Security alert. All residents must remain in their assigned areas until further notice." Mara and Tassar exchanged alarmed glances. "They can't know what we've done," she said. "We've been careful." Tassar accessed the station's public information feed on his personal device. "It's not about us, at least not directly. Commissioner Zarkel has announced a special session of the Technology Exchange. All guild members are required to attend." "What's the purpose?" Tassar scrolled through the announcement, his patterns darkening. "He's presenting a major technological breakthrough, something called Legacy Integration Protocol. The description is vague, but it mentions reclaiming abandoned developmental pathways and synthesis of historical and contemporary methodologies. It sounds like—" Mara felt cold realization sweep over her. "He's going to announce the discovery of human technology as if it were a gel innovation. He must have been monitoring the archive or monitoring us somehow." Tassar's patterns shifted to alarm. "This is worse than you realize. If Zarkel controls the narrative, he can selectively reveal aspects of human technology while maintaining the guild's dominance. Nothing will fundamentally change." Mara looked at Prometheus now, humming with energy from the Lagrange cell. "We need to move up our timeline. The special session, when is it scheduled?" 2 hours from now, the main exhibition hall." "Perfect." Mara began the suit-up sequence, Prometheus's components closing around her with mechanical precision. "We'll give them a demonstration they can't ignore or rewrite." "What are you planning?" Tassar asked his patterns, showing concern. Mara engaged the helmet, the transparent faceplate, sliding into place. "Something dramatic. I need you to do one more thing for me, something that might be the riskiest part of all." The central exhibition hall was filled beyond capacity. Guild members from across the station had gathered for Commissioner Zarkel's announcement, their neural patterns creating a shifting sea of light that reflected off the polished surfaces of the chamber. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Special sessions were rare, usually reserved for truly revolutionary developments. Zarkel stood on the central platform, resplendent in ceremonial guild attire. The metallic filaments in his robes connected directly to the presentation systems, allowing him to control the surrounding displays with thought alone. "Distinguished members of the Technology Guild." He began his voice, carrying the harmonic overtones of authority. "For centuries we have led the Alliance through continuous innovation, elevating all species through our mastery of neural integration and quantum mechanics." The displays around him showed a montage of gel technological achievements. The first neural interfaces, the development of consciousness transference, the quantum entanglement networks that form the backbone of interstellar communication. Today, I present the next evolution in our continuing journey. Through careful archaeological research and theoretical reconstruction, my team has recovered techniques from the pre-Alliance era that, when synthesized with our current methodologies, create unprecedented possibilities. The central hologram shifted to display a familiar shape, a mechanical exoskeleton with integrated neural controllers. Not identical to Prometheus, but unmistakably derived from the same design principles. The Legacy Integration Protocol allows us to reclaim abandoned technological pathways, even those once pursued by developing species, such as humans, and perfect them through gel innovation. A murmur ran through the crowd. The mention of human technology in such a context was unusual. The Guild typically downplayed any connection between their advanced systems and the primitive approaches of lesser species. Zarkel continued warming to his theme. "This is not simply archaeology, it is resurrection and transcendence. By understanding the limitations that cause these pathways to fail, we can transform them into—" His presentation was interrupted by a commotion at the chamber's entrance. Security personnel moved toward the disturbance neural patterns, flashing with alert signals. Then the crowd parted, revealing a figure that silenced the entire hall. Mara stood in the doorway, encased in Prometheus-marked Ascend. The suit had transformed from the primitive, mechanical device that had been mocked days earlier. Now, it gleamed with purpose, each movement fluid and powerful. The Lagrange cell at its core emitted a soft blue glow that pulsed in rhythm with the suit's operations. "Commissioner Zarkel," she called, her amplified voice carrying across the hushed chamber. "I believe you were about to discuss the origins of your breakthrough." Zarkel's neural patterns flashed with what might have been alarm before settling into a configuration of cold authority. "Engineer Vega, this is a closed session for Guild members only. Your presence is unauthorized and inappropriate." Mara walked forward each step of the exosuit, echoing on the polished floor. The security personnel moved to intercept her, but hesitated when they saw the unfamiliar technology integrated into the suit's design. "I thought the Guild valued innovation," she said, continuing her advance toward the central platform. "And I've brought something truly innovative to share." Zarkel gestured sharply, and the security officers moved to form a barrier between Mara and the platform. "Remove her," he ordered. "This disruption will be noted in your permanent record, Engineer Vega." But Mara had anticipated the response. With a series of swift movements that the original Prometheus could never have accomplished, she navigated around the security cordon the suit's enhanced hydraulics, allowing her to leap over their formation entirely. She landed on the edge of the central platform, the impact causing ripples in the holographic displays surrounding Zarkel. The Commissioner backed away, his neural patterns now openly displaying alarm. "What you call the Legacy Integration Protocol has another name," Mara announced, addressing the crowd, rather than Zarkel. "In the original human records, it was called Project Prometheus, a mechanical assistance framework designed to operate with or without neural interfaces." Whispers spread through the gathered Guild members. Zarkel's patterns shifted to anger. "These allegations are absurd. Security, restrain this human immediately." "Before you do," Mara continued unfazed, "you might want to see what a 700-year-old human technology can do when properly implemented." She activated the Lagrange cell's display function, projecting its energy signature into the chamber's sensor network. The readings appeared on the Guild's own monitor's power levels that exceeded anything in the current Alliance registry. "Impossible," someone in the crowd murmured. "Those readings can't be accurate." "But they are," came a new voice from the back of the chamber. Tassar stepped forward, his customs uniform replaced by the formal attire of a Guild archivist. "And I can verify their authenticity." Zarkel's patterns betrayed his recognition. "Officer Tassar, you're exceeding your authority." "I'm fulfilling my duty as a certified Guild historian." Tassar replied, his neural patterns displaying the formal configuration of official testimony. "The technology Commissioner Zarkel is presenting today is not a new discovery. It is human technology developed 7 centuries ago and subsequently appropriated by early gel researchers." He raised his hand, revealing a data crystal, identical to the one he had given Mara. "I have accessed the original human archives that were supposed to be destroyed, but were preserved by Gels who believed in honest collaboration rather than appropriation." The crowd's reaction was immediate shock, disbelief, and growing anger as the implications became clear. Guild members turned to one another, neural patterns flashing in rapid communication. Zarkel raised his voice over the growing tumult. "These claims are preposterous. The Guild's technological lineage is well documented. A few superficial similarities to abandoned human approaches mean nothing." "Then explain this." Mara challenged, sending another command through Prometheus's systems. The suit's external projectors activated, displaying the original Project Prometheus documentation, complete with Earth Defense Initiative classification markers and timestamps from 7 centuries past. "Or this," Tassar added, accessing the chamber's main display system with his archivist credentials. The screens shifted to show comparative analyses, Guild neural interface designs alongside their human precursors, quantum entanglement communications, next to human evolutionary pathways, schematics, dimensional energy, extractors beside Lagrange cell blueprints. The evidence was overwhelming and unmistakable. The fundamental technologies that had elevated the Gels to dominance had been developed by humans before the resource wars and the formation of the Alliance. Zarkel's neural patterns pulsed with fury. "This is treason, guards, arrest them both." But the security personnel hesitated, uncertain. The chamber had erupted into chaos, guild members demanding explanations, some even calling for Zarkel's immediate suspension pending investigation. In the midst of the confusion, something unexpected happened. Prometheus, or rather the integration of its mechanical systems with the Lagrange cell, and the archive data Mara had downloaded, began to exhibit autonomous behaviors. Energy fields shimmered around the suit, forming protective barriers that the security officer's weapons couldn't penetrate. "What's happening?" Tassar asked, moving closer to Mara despite the growing danger. Mara watched in amazement as Prometheus's systems reconfigured without her input. I think the original Prometheus project included autonomous defense protocols. When we integrated the Lagrange cell with the archive data, you activated something more than just a power source, Tassar realized. The archive must contain operational code that recognized compatible hardware. Zarkel, seeing his authority crumbling, made a desperate move. He activated his emergency override, triggering the chamber's containment protocols. Transparent barriers began to descend from the ceiling, designed to isolate threats until higher security could respond. But Tassar had anticipated this possibility. Throughout the chamber, small devices he had planted earlier came to life, broadcasting the proceedings to every public display on the station. What had begun as a closed guild session was now playing on thousands of screens throughout Metis, witnessed by beings of every species. "It's too late," Commissioner Tassar called as the barriers descended. "The truth is already spreading. The archives are being copied to independent servers across the station. You cannot contain this." Zarkel's patterns displayed a rage beyond any gel expression Mara had ever witnessed. "You have no idea what you've done. The Guild's technological authority maintains order throughout the Alliance. Without it, chaos will follow." "Not chaos." Mara countered her voice, amplified by Prometheus's systems, to penetrate the barriers. "Progress. Real progress built on honest collaboration, rather than appropriation and suppression." As the security containment completed isolating the central platform from the rest of the chamber, Mara found herself face to face with Zarkel. The Commissioner's neural patterns had stabilized into cold determination. "You think you've won," he said quietly, so that only Mara could hear. "But the Guild has contained threats before. Records can be altered. Memories can be adjusted. In a year, no one will remember this incident." "You're wrong," Mara replied, equally soft, "because you've overlooked something fundamental about human technology." "And what might that be?" Zarkel asked with contempt. "We build redundancy into everything." Mara smiled behind her faceplate. "The archive wasn't just stored here on Metis. The Galactic Archive Project distributed copies throughout human space 7 centuries ago. Tassar and I have activated dormant nodes on 12 different stations. Every guild suppression attempt will trigger the release of more information." For the first time, Zarkel's confidence faltered. "You're bluffing. Such a distributed system would have been detected." "Not if it was designed to look like something else. Something so primitive that no one would think to examine it closely." Mara gestured to Prometheus. "Sometimes, nuts and bolts can hide the most sophisticated secrets." The aftermath unfolded more rapidly than either Mara or Tassar had anticipated. Within days, the Technology Guild's stranglehold on innovation had begun to crumble. Guild members from various factions, some motivated by genuine ethical concerns, others simply positioning themselves advantageously in the new reality, came forward with additional evidence of technological appropriation. Zarkel disappeared from public view, reportedly fleeing to a private research facility in the outer systems. Rumors suggested he had taken classified archives with him, but with the distributed nature of the newly awakened Galactic Archive Project, his ability to suppress the information was severely limited. The Alliance Council, forced to respond to the growing crisis, established an independent commission to investigate the origins of core technologies and re-evaluate species classifications based on technological capability. The preliminary findings sent shockwaves through Alliance space. Dozens of species had been systematically denied access to technologies they had helped develop. 3 months after the confrontation in the exhibition hall, Mara stood at the viewport of her new laboratory aboard Metis Station. The space formerly restricted to Guild researchers had been reassigned as part of the Technological Reconciliation Initiative. Through the transparent wall, she could see ships of various designs docking at the station, many bearing markings of independent research cooperatives that had sprung up following the Guild's decline. "The Centauri delegation has arrived," Tassar announced as he entered the lab. His position had evolved as dramatically as Mara's, from a customs officer to a key liaison between former Guild structures and newly empowered species representatives. "Have they brought the gravitic compression data?" Mara asked, turning from the viewport. "Better. They've brought a working prototype based on the combined human-Centauri designs from the archive. Apparently their engineers had been developing similar theories independently, but were blocked from Alliance registration by Guild restrictions." Mara smiled, still amazed by how quickly collaborative innovation had accelerated once the artificial barriers fell. "Add them to the afternoon session. I want them to meet the Rigelian metallurgists. There might be applications for their composite materials." The laboratory around them hummed with activity. Engineers and scientists from a dozen species worked at various stations, combining technologies that had been artificially kept separate for centuries. In the center of the room stood Prometheus Mark III, a collaborative redesign that incorporated contributions from 8 different technological traditions. "Have you reviewed the latest proposals for the Academy?" Tassar asked, referring to the educational institution they were establishing to ensure the open sharing of innovation. "Most of them. I'm particularly interested in the curriculum structure proposed by the Eridani. Their approach to integrating theoretical and practical learning seems promising." Tassar's neural patterns displayed thoughtful consideration. "It pairs well with the mentorship model the human delegates suggested. We could implement both in parallel tracks." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the lab's communication system. The main display activated, showing a live feed from a launching platform on the station's exterior. A sleek vessel was preparing for departure, the first ship built entirely with recovered and integrated technologies from the Galactic Archive project. Its hull bore a simple inscription, "Human Legacy." "Right on schedule," Mara noted, checking the chronometer. "The test flight to the Arcturus system and back should take less than a week with the improved FTL configuration." Tassar moved to stand beside her, both of them watching as the ship's engines flared to life, a brilliant blue reminiscent of the Lagrange cell's glow. 700 years, he said quietly. "That's how long it took for the truth to emerge." "But it did emerge," Mara replied. "And now, we have the opportunity to build something better than either humans or Gels could have created alone." The ship detached from its moorings, hovering momentarily before accelerating smoothly into the star-filled darkness beyond the station. Mara thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment, from a ridiculed exhibitor of primitive technology to the co-director of the most advanced research initiative in Alliance space. 700 years have passed, she said, echoing words she had written in the Academy's founding charter. But humanity's journey has only just begun, and this time we're not traveling alone. As if in response, Prometheus Mark III activated in its docking station systems, coming online without any direct command. The suit, now more a symbol than a practical tool, straightened to its full height, the soft blue glow of its power core pulsing like a heartbeat. A reminder that sometimes the oldest technologies contain the seeds of the most profound innovations, especially when freely shared among the stars.